Coming from a traditional background, it's important to me that I have some of those tools that I have as a traditional artist in my digital toolbox as well. Things from brushes to paper textures and of course to mixing colors and creating color sets is very important to me. So let's go through the interface really quickly and show you how you can get started with a painting very quickly. So when you open Painter, you're going to go up to the menu bar where all of your drop downs are located. And these are all the effects, brushes and layer modes and canvas and editing functions that you can do in Painter. But to get started, we're just simply going to go to File and select New. The next step will give us the opportunity to decide what we're going to name this painting. So for example, I'm going to call this Cypress Trees at Sunset. And I can also use a defined preset. By opening the flyout, I can use the Painter Default, Portrait, Painter Default Modified, or Painter 11 Default. And I can add those or remove them as well. But for this one, I'm going to set my mode to inches instead of pixels, and I'm going to go with a 14 by 11 canvas size. I'm going to set my resolution to 150, which is the default here. And I can also change the color of my paper as well. So if you feel like you want to work with a particular color of paper, you can simply click on the color icon and then go in and resolve and pick the color that you'd like to use. Whether it's a light gray to a light yellow, the options are limitless. Just select OK and you're ready to begin. You can also choose a paper texture. Within Corel Painter X3, you're going to find many paper textures to choose from and several new watercolor textures that are great fun. I'm going to simply choose the handmade watercolor, but keep in mind that you can change your paper texture at any time. So let's select OK. And that's going to open up a brand new canvas for us, and we can begin painting with Painter. So for example, if I want to choose a brush now, I'm simply going to open the drop down and take a look at all the brushes that are available for me to choose from. From erasers to chalks to crayons to digital watercolors. And again, I think I'm going to pick up that Real Hard Conte, which is a wonderful brush to begin sketching with. Every brush has a property bar which tells you everything you need to know about that brush. But there's more. When you select the Reset tool, you can make changes or bring that brush back to its default state if you've changed the size, changed the grain, resaturation, or any of those different effects that you see on the main menu here. So keep that in mind. If you need to get a brush back to its default settings quickly, then simply use the Reset tool and you're ready to go. So if I enlarge this brush by holding down the Control-Alt key, you can see I have a larger brush stroke. If I want to reset the brush back to its default, watch the size and take a look. When I hit the reset, it goes back to its default size and I'm ready to continue. Many of these brushes also contain what we call a grain setting. The grain setting basically is how the brush reacts to the grain of the paper texture. So I'm going to enlarge my brush a little bit and I'm going to increase the grain setting. And we don't see a whole lot of grain in this particular brush stroke. However, when I take the grain setting down to a lower setting, and I'm going to change the color here, you can see now that we're starting to reveal some of that great watercolor texture below. And if I bring it down to even lower settings, there will come a point where we'll have to put quite hard pressure on the brush in order to get the grain to actually come out. So the lower the grain setting, the more texture is going to be revealed in your brush stroke. So this is one of the wonderful ways that you can just simply begin with Painter X3. Again, using the drop down from the brush selector, you can easily scan through and select various brushes that you can begin experimenting with, from watercolor to acrylics, and of course the ability to create custom brushes as well. Located in your default palettes, you're going to find a palette called the Navigator, and I'm going to pull the Navigator out here so we can take a closer look at it. Navigator panel can also be enlarged by simply pulling out either the lower corners or pulling out to the horizontal. You can work with the size of your image by either choosing the zoom out or the zoom in function, and as I continue to zoom in, you can see the effect. I can also change the tilt of the image and work with the rotation of the canvas. There are some other great options too, like the Navigator settings, where you can handle your color management, tracing paper opacity, toggling tracing paper, showing grids in Pasto, and selecting your drawing modes when you're working in selection modes. So this is a real powerful little tool that you can use to enhance your experience as well. Another important panel is our Layers panel. The Layers panel is one of the most powerful features in Painter, and as a traditional artist I found it very, very helpful in creating certain depth in my paintings, being able to overlap colors and blending, and of course using what we call the layer composite methods, which if you're familiar with blend modes, you will know these as in Painter as composite methods, but we've got multiply, overlay, soft light, and most of these you'll be very familiar with. But they can also change the look of the paint that's on the particular layer that you're working on. So they're lots of fun to experiment with. Another great function in Painter is the mixer pad. The mixer pad lets you blend colors together to create new colors. And again, as a traditional artist, you're probably familiar with this, but having this tool in Painter is so exciting because you're able to mix those paints that are familiar to you to create those colors, to create those complementary color schemes. There's nothing like it. So I encourage you to use the mixer pad if you're used to mixing your own colors. You can actually use the mixer pad with existing colors, or you can bring in an image to use on your mixer pad to sample colors from, and it just doesn't get any better than this. Lots of great functionality in the mixer pad. The next important item to a traditional artist going into digital painting is the papers. So let's take a look at the Paper Libraries panel. The paper panels let you create and modify and apply paper textures. And let's take a look at a couple of ways we can access our papers. On the toolbar, you'll notice that there's an icon at the bottom which is our paper textures. and we can simply open the little flyout and choose a particular paper texture that we want to use. But if we want to go in a little bit deeper and maybe make some changes to those papers, then we're going to go up to the window menu, come down to paper panels, and choose papers. And it will open up the papers and the paper libraries panel, where we have a little more control of how that paper is going to interact with our particular brush that we're using. On the papers panel, we can work with either the paper scale, the paper contrast, or paper brightness. When we go to the paper libraries, this gives us the opportunity to scan through our current paper texture libraries or actually create new paper textures. Let's go ahead and open the brushes again and take a look at what we call the brush libraries. And in any particular brush category, you're going to find all the brushes that are available for you to use in Painter to create your next masterpiece. This happens to be the real watercolor brush category, and you'll notice that there are several brushes that you can choose from. So by simply clicking a brush, you're able to start painting and to begin your painting, and you can start on any particular layer that will allow you to paint on either the canvas layer or any additional layers that you've added. The one caveat would be the liquid ink and the real watercolor brush categories. These brushes, when you use them, will actually add a new layer called the watercolor layer or the liquid ink layer. When we take a little bit closer look at the layers panel, there's a layer at the very bottom called the canvas, and the canvas is a rectangular work area inside the drawing window whose size determines the size of the image you create. So the canvas acts as the image background, and unlike a layer, it is always locked. So if you're a traditional artist, quite often you're used to working on one particular layer and applying paint to either over existing paint or under existing paint, depending upon how you're working. But you can work very similar to this in Painter. Many times I like to work with, I'm going to go back to my charcoal and Conte and pick up the real hard Conte brush, and I'm going to set that brush back to its default size, and I'm going to make sure that I've got my color panel open here, and this way I can move the tick around and really select colors very specific to what I'm going to need for the painting that I'm doing. I can also use my Alt key, which will sample existing colors that are already in the image. So this is a great way to work when you need to perhaps sample a green and then bring the value up a little bit lighter to create some cast light on any particular part of your painting, such as the top of the tree, where I'd want the tone to be a little bit lighter and to have a darker value towards the bottom. And I can do that by just simply moving around the hue, saturation, and value triangle and be able to pick exactly the color that I'm looking for to get started with. Again, you can see how this brush really responds to paper texture. And remember, at any given time, you can actually change your paper texture and work with different paper textures to get started on as well. So if I wanted to enhance the sky, I could simply pick up a blue and maybe deepen it at certain points, use my Alt key and sample colors, and bring my brush size up. And it's just, is such a a wonderful way to work. It feels so much like working traditionally. And when you give yourself the opportunity to just work very simply from the start, by simply choosing File, New, creating a new canvas to work on, then picking up a real hard Conte, or going over and grabbing a great pencil such as the 2B pencil right here, working with a grain setting and finding something that works the way you want it to look, get that color in, and you can see that this is a very, very realistic pencil and gives you a very, very traditional look. So File, New, go up to the corner here and open the drop down, go into your brush categories and libraries and create and just pick wonderful, wonderful brush variants to begin with, from real wet oils to pastels to chalks and crayons, and a great category called the artist category, which includes some wonderful uh, impasto brushes, impressionistic brushes, and one of my favorite, the Sargent brushes, which include the Sargent brush, Sargent Super Jitter, and the coarse Sargent Super Jitter. All these brushes are absolutely amazing, and you're going to have more fun with them. The other brush that I'd like to mention here also that you're going to enjoy is the blender brush category. And one of my favorite brushes, one of my favorite blenders in this brush category is called the Grainy Water Brush. Most of your blenders will have what we call a resaturation setting on the brush's property bar. They are, for the most part, set to 0%, which means that when you use them, you're going to be blending the underlying pixels. However, these brushes also make great brushes for painting by simply bringing up the resaturation setting and using my Alt key to sample colors. I can use this brush actually to add color with as well. So any brush that you see out there that has a resaturation setting, you can oftentimes either take it down to 0 and use it as a great blender brush, or bring the resaturation up and use it as a brush to paint with. Finally, I'd like to give you one more great and exciting addition to Painter X3. And it's called the Advanced Brush Controls, and you'll find it located on the brush's property bar. With this current brush called the Real Hard Conte, I can click on this and it'll open up a new grouping of panels that includes some of the most important aspects to this particular brush and where you can get into fine-tuning your brush. You can see that the brush is a hard media brush, and you can change the squeeze, you can change the stepping, the resaturation, the opacity, and the grain settings. It goes on and on. At the bottom of the panel, you'll also see an area called stroke jitter and a little preview of how that brush will look when you apply the paint. So I think the most important thing that I can tell you about the new additions to Painter X3 and getting started from the traditional artist coming into the digital artist, and using the digital canvas, is that the experience that you're going to create in Painter is going to mimic the traditional work that you're doing. And I think you're going to be very, very surprised at how realistic this approach is going to be when you're using the advanced brush controls and making further changes to your brush to get that brush to basically react as you would expect it to. It's just getting better and better all the time with Painter, and the ability or and the exciting experience of being able to come in to a digital painting program and reproduce the look of traditional media is just getting better and better. And I hope you will enjoy using Painter X3 as much as I have over the years. It just continues to make my painting experience all the more exciting, and the changes and the improvements that have come out in Painter X3 I'm sure will more than delight you. And go and get painting. Have some fun.